Named one of the Wall Street Journal's 10 best places to go in 2025, Traverse City is northern Michigan magic. Think sparkling blue waters, golden dunes, and of course, incredible food. This summer marks the debut of the Traverse City Food and Wine Festival, running August 20th through 24th. The event highlights both national and local chefs including Tyler Florence, Ji-Hae Kim, Mei Lin, and Kate Williams, and features ticketed dinners, a grand tasting tent, and wine tasting. Visit traversityfoodandwine.com for details. I love Maine lobster for its versatility in the kitchen and its iconic flavor. The sweetest lobster on earth, prepared in pasta, served chilled in a salad, and of course in a lobster roll. Maine's lobster fishery is among the most sustainable in the world, with every lobster harvested by hand, one trap at a time, from independently owned and operated dayboats. Maine lobster can be purchased year-round, fresh or frozen, raw or pre-cooked, shell on or shell off, and with ready-to-eat and ready-to-use options. Visit lobsterfrommaine.com for details.
And I always say that like Bahrain is a big mashup of Arabic, Persian, and Indian flavors. So big, grand rice dishes, really herb heavy, lots of sour flavors, but it's also quite rustic. Like it's not like a refined cuisine. It's really rustic and comforting, which is something that I really love about it.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Eliza Barbanel. Noor Murad is a Bahrain-born, New York-trained, and London-based chef, and the author of the wonderful new cookbook, Lugma. You may know her recipes from her time running the Ottolenghi test kitchen and contributing to the books Palestine, Shelf Love, and Extra Good Things. Now it's time to get to know Noor herself through this delicious collection of traditional and reimagined dishes from Bahrain and beyond. Noor Murad, this is Taste. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I know it's the end of the day for you in London, and we're just getting going here in New York, so I'm curious if you've had anything good to eat today so far.
So far, I've been testing a recipe for my Substack, but it wasn't the way I had planned. I had envisioned it, so I need to start from scratch again. So, it was fine. But yeah, there's a lot of aubergines happening, a lot of aubergine recipes happening in my kitchen at the moment.
I think that's very smart, and I think it's nice to hear that people are testing recipes for Substack and, making sure that they work perfectly before putting it out into the world. Can you share what is like the final recipe? What do you want it to be?
Well, I had wanted to do like a sweet and sour kind of aubergines with pomegranate molasses and like pine nuts and parsley, but yeah, I think it was just a bit muddled. Like I need it to get to a point where it's like more streamlined and like the flavors are more pronounced. I'm probably just gonna strip it back, but I might just start over. As long as the aubergines shine, because we're coming into summer soon. It's gonna be aubergines everywhere, and people love a good aubergine or eggplant if you're in New York.
It's full UK immersion to hear aubergine. And I love speaking with you a little bit about your testing development process. I think that's a skill that you must have really honed, in your culinary career and certainly at the Ottolenghi test kitchen. And I want to kind of dig into all of that. But I guess to start and give a little bit more context just about who you are and like the approach that you're bringing to food, I'm wondering if you could share an early food memory with me.
An early food memory. So one of my earliest food memories is actually driving to this like hole in the wall place with my dad. And it was very like haphazard kind of situation, but it was just a man and a big pot where he would fry samosas, but we call them sambusa. And they would be stuffed with like spicy potatoes or spicy mung beans or cheese. And you'd get like 5 for, I don't know, like a few pennies worth. It was very, very cheap. And he'd stuff it, like fry it fresh, stuff it into a paper bag, and you get it, and then like the grease kind of stains through the paper bag. And I used to go with my dad. We always used to have the potato one because my dad is a potato man. And we'd eat it in the car and just like burn our mouths in the process and get grease stains all over our shirts. And And that was one of my earliest food memories.
I love that memory. I'm also a potato man, so I think that sounds really delicious. And I think it speaks to like one of the beautiful things about reading your book, Lugama, is like you're talking a lot about the food of Bahrain, which is a place that I've never been to before, and I haven't had a lot of opportunity to try the food. So I think the way that you're writing about it is so beautiful and descriptive. And I'm wondering for somebody listening who maybe also is a little unfamiliar, if you could just kind of say a little bit about like how would you describe Bahraini food and like maybe if there are any like cultural, geographic influences that you feel really kind of come across in the food that people are eating and enjoying.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for those that don't know too much about Bahrain, it's a tiny island in the Persian Gulf. It's really, really small. It's about 50 miles long from top to bottom. So very much small community, very big on seafood. But throughout history, it was an important seaport and center of trade. So a lot of cultures would pass through and leave their influences. So, from like Portuguese to cultures to Indian, Persian, Arabic. And I always say that like Bahrain is a big mashup of Arabic, Persian, and Indian flavors. So big, grand rice dishes, really herb heavy, lots of sour flavors, dried limes, slow cooked meats. Everything is very, very spiced. There's like kind of like masala spice mixes for everything. Very seafood heavy, but then there's like a huge street food scene, lots of grills, grilled meats on charcoal, samosas, and these kind of things. So it's really, really big on flavor, but it's also quite rustic. Like it's not like a refined cuisine. It's really rustic and comforting, which is something that I really love about it.
Yeah, I think it all sounds so delicious to me, but I especially enjoyed noticing that you have a whole rice chapter in the book because rice is my preferred carb of choice.
Oh, good.
Did you always like know you wanted to have a whole rice
Yeah.
chapter?
Yeah, I always knew I was like, if I ever write my own book, it will have a rice chapter because for me, rice is like the superior carb. And I live in London and I know it's like a potato nation. So I feel like I'm constantly fighting the battle of best carb. But rice is it's like the main staple carb in Bahrain. Ironically, it's not even native to the land. We're a desert. We don't have the land to be able to harvest rice, but it was introduced through trade and it was adopted and now it's every like mealtime has to have a rice dish. Our national dish is a rice dish in Bahrain, and I just really really wanted to give the rice a lot of love and do a whole chapter for it because I think people are very intimidated by cooking rice. And I kind of just want to show that you can dress it up and dress it down. There's so much you can do with it. So yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to make the pitch for why rice is superior, but I think you kind of already hit that a little bit. I think one thing to me that's interesting is it's so easy like to serve like rice is complete on its own, but also it can really be kind of dressed up and like elaborated on and made really festive and celebratory.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just a really comforting thing to have. I I love to run, so like rice is like a really great fuel for me. And yeah, it's just like any excuse to have rice, I will. But yeah, I pretty much have rice. I'd say like 5 out of 7 days of the week.
Do you use a rice cooker?
No, I don't. I like to cook rice in a pot, like on my gas stove.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm like called old fashioned that way, but like it takes I mean, and nothing against rice cookers. They're really convenient, especially for like busy families and stuff. But like there's something about the act of cooking rice that I find super therapeutic and I wouldn't want to take that away.
Yeah, you are the rice cooker.
Yeah, I am. I am the rice cooker.
Something we were chatting about kind of briefly off mic is just how this book was an opportunity for you to be telling your own story, and you've had so much experience co-authoring books with the Ottolenghi Test Kitchen and recipes, etc. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to your kind of culinary background and kind of these collaborative environments that you've been in, and how maybe that kind of set you up to have this opportunity to be telling your own story and having your own book.
Yeah. Well, I'll try to keep it short. Like I guess I've been working in food since I was 16, and from Bahrain. And I had like lots of different experiences. So working in catering, working in hotels, working in restaurants. I moved to New York. I studied at the Culinary Institute of America. I stayed for 1 year to work in New York City. I did my internship in Hawaii, and it was just like all these different influences in my life. But I moved back to Bahrain in my 20s. And, well, I've always been an island girl, so I always felt like I was going to come back home. But I struggled a bit in Bahrain with work opportunities, and like I felt like I wasn't learning the way you would in like a big city with so many different influences and so many different people. And when I moved to London, I joined the Ottolenghi, and I was working as a sous chef at one of the delis. And at this point, I think I was in like my late 20s. I was a bit burnt out, and I was kind of looking for a change. And then the test kitchen job kind of landed in my lap. Someone told me there's an opportunity at the test kitchen, and I said, "What's the test kitchen?" I didn't really know what it involved so much, but I soon came to know that it was like this kind of like creative hub where you create recipes for different publications, whether that's online or on newspapers, Guardian, New York Times, or for the Ottolenghi books. And I've always been creative. I'd always put like new dishes on the menu. So it felt like, oh, this is maybe the right step for me. And that was like my first insight into the world of publishing. My first project was working on Palestine with Sami Tamimi and Tara Wigley, which was really, really amazing because I was the lead recipe developer for that. And I really kind of saw what it took to write a book, because before then you get this really beautiful cookbook, but you don't really think about the process involved in that, right? Like you think like, oh, this is a bunch of recipes collected, but like the recipes just brush the surface. It's also like you have to present a story. You have to kind of put it together. You have a pitch, you have a cover, you have a design, and quality of paper. There's so many things to think about, and so many people involved in a book, which it really takes a whole village. And it really made me appreciate books so much more. And so eventually I went on to head the test kitchen. And it was actually during lockdown that Yotam Ottolenghi said to me, "Oh, why don't we do the Ottolenghi Test Kitchen cookbooks?" And that's kind of how I wrote those two books, and made all the recipes and stuff for them. So it really gave me a lot of like practical practice into what it takes to write a book and recipe development process. So yeah, that's kind of a long way of summarizing my
I think that was
career.
great because I did the research, and there is so many chapters. So I think you kind of summed it up so nicely. And, I find that sometimes like when you know more about something, like maybe this is just me, but sometimes I'm less likely to do something if I know exactly how hard it's going to be. So I was curious, after having so much experience, working on all these other great books, like did that make you more eager to do your own, or like how did you kind of come up with this motivation and idea to make Lugama?
Yeah, I think it definitely. I knew that I always had a story to tell. Like it's been like a lifelong dream to write a cookbook. It's something I'd wanted since I was little. I was always obsessed with cookbooks, and I just didn't know when or how that would ever take shape. But I think when you write, when you're a co-author, especially if you're writing under such a big name like Ottolenghi, um, it's hard to kind of feel complete ownership over the work. Yeah, it's quite a conflicting feeling, because okay, these are my recipes, this is my writing, but it doesn't truly feel yours. So I think at that point I felt like, okay, it's my time now. It's kind of like spread my wings and do this on my own, because I knew that I could, and I knew that I had benefited a lot from learning from the best on to how to put a good cookbook together.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the resulting book is so thoughtful. And I imagine you spent a lot of time thinking about the components and the chapters and the storytelling. I guess I'm curious how you went about thinking about how the book would be constituted. Did you know that you wanted to have certain chapters from the beginning? And did you kind of sit down and plan it out, or did it kind of take shape along the way?
Yeah, originally I had thought that Lugma would be an exploration into the different countries that influence Bahraini food. So that was kind of my initial thought. I was like, okay, I'll go to all these different countries and I'll learn about like how it came to be that it landed in Bahrain. But then I realized that I went back to Bahrain after I left Ottolenghi just for a few weeks, just kind of like a break. It was like a month that I was back home. And I kind of realized that like actually the story is right here. It's where I grew up. It's the foods of Bahrain and also the foods of my childhood. And I felt like from living in London and living in the West for the first time in my late 20s, I kind of saw that there was a lack of representation on my part of the Middle East. People often associate Middle Eastern foods like with foods of the Levant, which are very, very delicious and amazing, but it's not the food that I grew up with. And the Middle East is such a diverse region. It's very rich in culture and history and language and people, but every single place and country you go to is a bit different, and the food included. So I really felt like with Lukma, I was like, okay, how do I push this forward and kind of show like different representation of a Middle East, of my Middle East?
Yeah, you're very intentional. I think in the intro you say like this book doesn't have any hummus recipes. Not that you don't like hummus and not that it's never eaten in Bahrain, but just that you want to be shining a focus on other things.
Yeah, and I think that, I love hummus, and it definitely does appear in Bahrain, but it's not Bahraini food. And I felt like it had enough representation. There's so many amazing, incredible chefs who have shared so many amazing recipes for things like hummus and falafel and shawarma and shakshuka, like all the hard hitters that people associate with Middle Eastern food. But for me, I was very intentional in not including them because I wanted to create space for different dishes, like majbouz, Bahrain's national rice dish, or madrouba, like a beaten chicken and rice, because these recipes deserve a platform, and I wanted to show that how diverse the Middle East is in terms of the foods that it can offer.
Yeah, I think that intention is really clear. And even in the beginning of the book, when you have a pantry section, you're kind of outlining some of your heavy hitter, like favorite ingredients that you think people should be like bringing in for the book. And one of them is like dried limes, which is something that I think is a kind of newer pantry ingredient for me to work with. And I'm wondering if you could maybe speak to what makes them so special.
Yeah, so dried limes are basically limes that have been dried in the sun until they're completely hollow through the center. So they come in as a lighter, like brownish, greenish color, or they're completely blackened. The only difference between the two, in terms of they're the same in terms of flavor profile, you can use them interchangeably, but the black limes have been heat treated, so they are that dark black color. Um, so in Bahrain, we call it Lumi Aswad, but it's also known as Lumi Armani, Lumi Basra. And dried limes are the backbone of cooking in Iraq, Iran, and the Gulf. And I never really thought about black limes until I moved to the UK, and I realized that it was such a foreign ingredient here for many people. And I started working at the Ottolenghi test kitchen, and I was creating recipes with black limes and really kind of pushed this forward through the books, the Ottolenghi flavor, Shelf Love. And I think it kind of popularized it definitely in London. You can get it more in like Middle Eastern, Turkish supermarkets, even like a big supermarket chain. But I really wanted to like show, like really, really, really showcase it in Lukma, because sometimes you'll get like a recipe with a black lime, you'll buy a bag of black limes, and then you'll just never use it again. But with Lukma, it's everywhere. It's in the rice dishes, it's in the stews, it's in marinades, it's in desserts, because I really wanted to show its versatility and how integral this one ingredient is to our cuisine.
Hey, podcast listeners. I'm Chris Morocco, food director of Bon Appetit and Epicurious, and host of the Dinner SOS podcast. Each week on the show, we bring the expertise of the Bon Appetit test kitchen to your kitchen. And this season, we've got a little something for everyone. We're debating whether spring produce is actually worth all the hype, solving your hosting anxieties, and helping you become a better baker with our BA Bake Club episodes on Dinner SOS.
I think it's so interesting what you're saying about dried limes and like how you've been able to kind of share them to a wider audience through like Ottolenghi and the popularity of all of those recipes. I'm curious if there are any other pantry ingredients in the book that you really want to be kind of highlighting and kind of raising up to a similar level of like a pantry ingredient that everyone should be having and cooking with.
Another one is date syrup, which isn't really new. I don't think like you could find it in a lot of like health food stores, but date syrup is used so much in Bahraini food. So we'll use like date syrup to make a type of rice called muhammar, because back then they didn't have sugar, so they use dates to sweeten things, and the rice is kind of sweetened. It's made like pilaf style with saffron and cardamom, and you have kind of like this sweet rice with very salty spiced fish. So you get a bit of both together. I even use it every day in my day-to-day on my porridge, like date molasses and tahini on banana on my porridge. In the book, I put it in desserts as well. Like we have legumat, which are also, I think, in like Greek cuisine. So it's basically fried dough that you then like toss in a sugar syrup. But in Bahrain, again, when they didn't have sugar, they tossed it in date syrup, which is just a more natural, sweet alternative that I love to use. And I think, it should definitely be added to everyone's pantries.
It sounds like such a good breakfast. I'm going to have to duplicate it tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh my God, you will. You'll be addicted.
I'm sure. I was curious also how you felt about wanting to approach the balance of, kind of preserving traditional recipes and sharing them in the book while also giving yourself room to, honor your own British Bahraini upbringing and your own kind of updated takes on things. Did you kind of try to walk that line at all?
Yeah, I definitely had a lot of conversations with myself when I was developing recipes for the book because, I'm not a traditional chef. Like, I don't usually cook traditional foods. I always kind of like to have a play with things because I am a child of two worlds. My mom is English, my dad is Arab. Even though I grew up in Bahrain, I had a bit of both cultures in my upbringing, and that was very much reflected in my food. But when putting together lugma, I really felt there was a lot of room and a necessity for some of the traditional dishes because it was introducing, this island that not many people know enough about or maybe don't have the right impression of. So I kind of felt like I would test the recipe. If it was something traditional, I would test it as it is. And then if I felt like I wanted to play around or switch things up, the main thing is that I kept the essence of the dish. But then other times I've just completely done something completely untraditional. It's just very Noor, very like a bit out there. But I've always kind of kept the Middle Eastern flavors. So there's a really good mix of both types, and that is what lugma is, and that's why I was very careful not saying lugma, a taste of Bahrain or something, because it is a taste of Bahrain, but also it's not, it's me. And that's why I kind of kept it like abundant dishes from my Middle East, because it's my impression and my upbringing, and it's quite personal in that sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense when encountering the book. And I don't mean to put you on the spot too much, but I'm curious if there's a recipe or two in the book that you think really encapsulate this kind of like Noor-specific point of view on like Bahraini food.
I think, for example, the date molasses rice, muhammar, that I included that recipe in the book. Traditionally, though, it's made with a fried rabbit fish, and they make a spice mix. They cover this rabbit fish with the spice mix, and they fry it, like shallow fry the fish, and you just have that. And it's not glamorous, but it's delicious. But then, I also was like, okay, you can't get rabbit fish in the West. And I know that this book is going to be bought mostly by a Western audience. And people, a lot of the time, if there's a whole fried fish in a recipe, they won't make it. So I kind of swapped it out for any kind of white fish. So like hake or halibut or wherever people prefer, kind of give them the option, like fillets that they can get from their local fishmonger or supermarket, and pan fry that with the rice. And then because I wanted to elevate the dish a bit more, I made like a date pickle. So really quick pickled dates with some red onion and spices. And that is very untraditional, but also very traditional because we do use dates in so much of our food. So it was finding a way of keeping the flavors as they are, but also westernizing it slightly or just making it a bit more accessible for people and elevating it just a little bit with like this like sweet and sour pickle.
Yeah, I love hearing about all of those components. And I think the result is, a really beautiful dish that, they're all standouts. But I think even like flipping through the book, like the food photography is so gorgeous. The styling is so
Thank
gorgeous.
you.
Did you style the shoot?
Yes, I did. I did style the shoot, which I remember when the photographer Matt Russell, when he found out that I was going to be the stylist, his face was like, because he didn't think that the chef should be focusing on the food and that's it. But I just assured him, I was like, look, I've styled the OTK books as well. Like I've never worked with a stylist. I just want to style my own food. I don't want it to be overly propped. I want to focus on the food and the plate itself. And so we did a bit of a dance on the first day, and then we kind of found our rhythm. I kind of made sure to be both in the kitchen. I was very hands-on. I'm a very hands-on author.
Yeah. I got that feeling, and really I can't think of a book with more delicious looking photos. Like even like the egg dishes, which I don't like eating eggs at all, but I was looking at like these beautiful golden fried eggs and I was like, maybe I should be eating these.
Yeah, maybe they'll turn you, I also like kind of dip in and out of eggs. Sometimes I get the egg ache, but I think that's just like working in food. Sometimes you can just overdo certain ingredients and then you need to just step away from them and then revisit them.
Yeah. Did you always know that you wanted to have this kind of like Bahraini location photography kind of slice of life shots as well in the book?
Yeah, I did because, I feel like a lot of the travel and food books, not but a lot of them I feel can like over glamorize a region or a country, and sometimes they're written from people from a Western perspective who go and travel there, and I really really wanted to show like a very real, like imperfect but perfect for me Bahrain. So I didn't want anything like over glamorized. I didn't want to show any like modern buildings or size skyscrapers or anything like that. I just really wanted to focus on like little local food spots, little farms, things like that. And just to give people like a little insight into the Bahrain that I remember, because Bahrain has changed so much in the last 20, 30 years. It's really, really undergone like this modern boom, which on the one hand is like necessary, but on the other hand, it's quite sad because it's not like the nostalgic memories of my upbringing. So I really because it was so much about how I grew up, I really wanted to honor that and like put those memories into print and go to the souks and go and show the little hole in the wall places and these farms, because I don't know if it'll change one day or they won't be there anymore. So yeah, it was really important for me to like add a bit of Bahrain in there. And just to give it like this warmth and like like a sense of like inviting the reader into my world.
Yeah, I think it does a really good job of that. I loved also reading about like you sending your photographer to the disappearing island with your dad.
Yeah, yeah, that was quite funny. They hadn't even met before, Jarada is an island that's like owned by Bahrain, like off the coast, but it's not really an island, just a sandbank. And I used to go there a lot when I was little. Like my dad is a fisherman. He had a little boat and we'd go, the four of us, me, my sister, mom and dad, and have like a picnic on this beach when it was low tide, because during a high tide, it doesn't show anymore. And I just have such beautiful memories from this place. And yeah, so I told Matt, I had two Matt photographers, but Matt is from Liverpool and he's lived in Bahrain for like 15 years. So he's practically a Bahraini now. And he's also a friend. So when I said to him, I just want to show the real Bahrain, he understood immediately. And I just said to him, I was like, okay, Matt, you're going to go with my dad. He'll take you to this island. He'd never been either. And they just totally hit it off. He called me up on the way back and he was so excited and he just loved it. And I knew that feeling. I knew that energy. And I was like, oh, the magic is still there. Like the island is still magical, even like 2 decades later.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm curious, like, how did you kind of attach a recipe to this disappearing island, especially if it doesn't even exist half of the time?
Yeah, it was hard because, I was like, at first I was like, well, maybe, it should be in the seafood chapter. It makes sense. It's like a little sandbank, should be something seafood. But I was just thinking of my mom used to always make like sandwiches for us, and like chopped up vegetables, fruits, like anything that would be fine in like the ice box. And it was never anything glamorous, but sometimes she'd make like it'd be like roast chicken, tomato, onion, cream cheese, like sandwiches, or tuna sandwiches, or she'd do like loads of roasted veggies and like press it into like a big sourdough bun with like pesto and stuff. And I just thought, I was like, oh, maybe I can put this into a chicken salad, and then that kind of transpired into salad olivier, which is one of my favorite salads. It's the Iranian salad, which is got chicken and potato and egg in it, kind of all that chopped up, and it's usually like mayonnaise based, but mine is like more yogurt. And it just kind of like transpired into like a salad olivier, and I called the recipe the Disappearing Island Salad Olivier. So yeah.
I love that. I'm curious, like thinking about all of the recipes in the book, if there was a recipe that you found was the most kind of difficult or complicated development and testing process to perfect.
Yes, I would say, and this is, I think, the most complicated recipe in the book, which is why I think I don't know how many people will attempt it, but I kept it in the book because this recipe is called Jabab Robian. It's in the seafood chapter, and they're basically prawn dumplings, but not like Asian style. It's the shell is made of blitzed prawns and rice flour, and it's stuffed with loads of fried onions and herbs and black lime and spices and golden raisins. And then you kind of make this sour tomato and tamarind broth from the prawn shells. And you kind of simmer these dumplings in that broth, and it's got loads of chard in it. And this is a really, really traditional dish. Like, it's so old that people don't make it anymore. And I saw it when I was younger on my grandparents' table. We used to have dinner there twice a week, every year. And during Ramadan, every single day. And this dish would only make an appearance during Ramadan. But, it soon like stopped making an appearance as I got into my teenage years, and people just don't really make it anymore because it's so time consuming and quite intricate. And it took me a little while to get it, because I hadn't had it for so long. But I just kind of created my own flavors. I kept it in the book because I wanted to keep it to preserve a Bahraini tradition that I think is kind of dying. And that's why I put it in there.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned this recipe, because when I was flipping through the book, I saw this and it really it does seem super difficult and time intensive, but there's so many sensibilities about it that I like. The fact that you're using the prawns in like the shell of the dumpling and not inside of it, and then that you're also using the shells separately. Like, there's so many elements of it that I think just represent this like very much like nothing is wasted, everything is being elevated style of cooking that I think is super cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's like a lot of flavor building, and it's very quite intricate, but it really makes me really appreciate. I was like, somebody invented this, like somebody thought this up. And I just really appreciate these old traditions a lot more when I try to make it and fit it into like modern day.
Yeah, as a contemporary recipe developer, like, do you often think about what it would be like to have been inventing these super traditional recipes? And like, I think the idea of like inventing a dish is something that seems almost like more rooted in the past than in the present today.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I feel like I don't even know if anyone invents dishes anymore nowadays. Like you can kind of put a different spin on something, but really it's like the same techniques over and over, especially with the rise of social media.
Mhm.
Social media is so loud. The food world, especially, like, I'm sure you're in it, so you're probably more aware of it, like because of people we follow, etc. And it's just like, oh my God, it's just everything that could be done has been done. So yeah, I do kind of think back to those times and like, oh, somebody has put this together. But the interesting thing with Bahraini food is that every household has its own way. There's no like one correct way. It's not like, with Italian food, like a carbonara, this is the way, this is the traditional way, these are the techniques. Like Bahraini food isn't like that. It's freestyle. As long as you keep the essence, which is like what we call in Arabic nafas, which is like the soul, the essence of a dish. As long as that's there, then it's Bahraini. But every house has its own little tips, like tricks of doing things differently.
I love like nefes and like the soul of a dish. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak to what the book title means, because I loved reading about it in the book.
So lugma means a bite in Arabic. And it's pronounced, I spelt it phonetically the way we would pronounce it in Bahrain, because the qaf, which is is a letter in Arabic, a classical Arabic alphabet, we soften it in Bahrain. We never say qa. We use a g like ga. So lugma is the way we'd pronounce it, and lugma means a bite. And when I was thinking of the name of this book, it came very naturally because I remember my grandfather, who passed away a few years ago, and he always said, "One day you're going to write a book." I don't think he ever envisioned it would be a cookbook, but he used to like cut out newspaper clippings of himself, and he gave my mom a file once when I was little, and said, "Noor's going to write a book one day, so she needs to tell everybody that her grandfather was known in Bahrain. So here's clippings of me." And he was a feeder. Like my grandfather was like the heart of our family. He really brought everyone together. I said, like, we used to go twice a week, every week, and it was so important. Everything was centered around the table. And my grandfather would often he ate with his hands, and eating with your hands is a skill, I think, like to not get it down you. You really have to like know how to like properly like smush the rice. It's the only way I can say it. And and make a lugma with the rice. And often I think that if somebody makes you a lugma or says, "Oh, can I make you a little bite?" they'll like really think about like, okay, so this person is going to have one bite from my plate, and I want to make sure they have a little taste of everything, and they hand it to you. So I say that lugma is the ultimate form of love, because it's something that is created from someone's hand, really from their heart, and they're handing it from one heart to another. They're handing it to you. So yeah, it's and because I put so much love into lugma, yeah, I just, it made sense to call it that.
Yeah, I think as someone who likes to give bites of food as a love language, I totally resonated with that. And it is just the perfect name for the book. And to close today, I want to play a little rapid fire game with you. So I'm going to have you play some favorites. I'll ask you some questions, and you'll just give me the first answer that comes to mind.
Sure.
Okay. Your favorite cookbook right now that is not one of your own?
Bethlehem by Fadi Kettan.
So good. A recipe from Lugma that you would make for dinner tonight?
Oh,
if you had the ingredients.
Well, I have loads of aubergines at the moment, so I'd probably make the burnt aubergine with fenugreek sauce, tahini, and fried shallots.
Is that the stuffed eggplant, or is that a different recipe in the book?
That's like a different one in the veggie section. So
Yeah.
it's like a veggie main, and I'm lucky I have a gas stove, so I love the smell of burnt aubergines, and I love that I can burn them on the fire. So that's probably what I would do.
That's great. Your go-to like food item to bring to a picnic?
Ooh, my go-to food item to bring, it's probably going to be a salad olivier. Because you can just stuff it into like lettuce wraps or into a sandwich, and everybody loves it. So
Your favorite ice cream flavor?
mint chocolate chip.
Do you like it when it's like artificially green?
No, I don't. No, because it tastes like a bit I don't know what they put in it, like a weird flavor. But except actually, I take it back. The Baskin Robbins mint chocolate chip is artificially green, but it is so good.
Sometimes it
So
just
yeah.
feels like nostalgically correct, I think.
Yeah, it's true. And you can't really get Baskin Robbins here. I think it's like a more of an American slash Bahrain thing. So
I love that that's our crossover item.
yeah.
Um, a spice that you think more people should cook with at home.
Fenugreek, specifically fenugreek seeds. I think they're like little stones. So people are like, what do I do with this? So you kind of do need a spice grinder to blitz it, but it has such a lovely aromatic, like kind of bitter flavor. But when you pair it with the right spices and especially a bit of sugar, it creates the most amazing foundation for a lot of like stews and curries.
Okay, I have to buy some.
Yeah.
Your favorite London bakery?
Kosov's. It's actually down the road from me, and it's owned by my friend who used to run the bakery at Ottolenghi. He left many years ago, and he'd always spoken about like opening up his own place, and I just really like loved hearing his story about like he grew up with bakeries. He has such an interesting background. His mom is like Indian Muslim. His dad is like a London Jewish. He has all these like kind of like Jewish and Indian influences in his cooking, and he just wanted to like put this into life through a bakery, which I just was so fascinated with. And then, he left Ottolenghi, didn't hear from him, and then a few years later, Kosov's opened like down the road from me, and I don't know, I just love stories like that. And and they have the best. He has like the best sourdough. So yeah.
Wow, that sounds great. I wish I lived close. Okay, your favorite London like special occasion restaurant?
Baranjek is, yeah, I would say I really love it. It's kind of, so it's like Iranian food, but kind of like elevated. So it has like home style vibes. There's like an open like grill. You see them making all the kebab and the rice and the bread, like flatbreads, grilling them and stuff. But it also is like kind of elevated and like you're like, oh yeah, I would pay money for this. But it's become like so hard to get reservation now. Before it was like a bit of a hidden secret. Now it's been discovered, so I'm a bit annoyed. I'm like, damn it, I can't get reservation at this place.
Yeah, I tried to eat there last December when I was in London, and I couldn't get a reservation. So I feel your pain.
Well, yeah. So imagine as a Londoner.
I'll plan ahead next time.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to.
Your go-to late night snack?
Hot chocolate.
What kind of
Hot
milk?
chocolate. Just regular milk, which is weird because I went through a phase where I cut out milk because I felt like I had a dairy intolerance for years and years, especially when I was at the test kitchen. And then I think it was working in the test kitchen, tasting so many foods, my stomach was like constantly on fire. And everything, it was like it was so irritable. It was mad at me. And then when I left and I wasn't testing in that volume and tasting all of my colleagues' dishes, everything kind of calmed down, and I reintroduced like certain foods back into my diet, including milk, which is joyous because I've never felt like a hot chocolate really tastes the same when it's with like soy or oat milk. So yeah, it's quite nice to be able to have
I think
it again.
you're right. I'm so thrilled to hear that, actually.
Does that similar to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think now I'm just talking about my gut health on the podcast, but I think like fermented, I think fermented dairy is easier. So like yogurt, cheese, no problem. But I would never like sit down and drink a glass of milk. And if I made a hot chocolate, I think it would probably be in alt milk. But I think you're right. It doesn't hit as hard if it doesn't have like that fatty dairy milk.
Yeah, no. And honestly, if you did a whole podcast on gut health, I will join you because I could tell you all about my journey. And I think it's something that's very specific to food content, food recipe developers and chefs. I think yeah, I have a whole theory behind it, but
Oh
for
my
another
God.
time.
Okay. We're going to make this happen just so I can speak at length with you about it. My final question today is a scene from a book or a movie, like a fictional food scene that you wish you could eat in real life.
A scene from a book or a movie. So this is so corny, but it's basically just the Harry Potter scene of when they have the butter beers and like and then the drinks and chocolate trolley in the train. With the chocolate frog. I don't know, it all sounds so like whimsical, and I kind of just want to be there, enjoying all these like magical things. Obviously with superpowers and all that and a wand.
Yeah, everything tastes better when you can do magic.
Yeah.
You know, as a kid, I loved Harry Potter, and it's funny to be like an American kid reading the books because, you know, they would call something like a pumpkin pasty instead of a pastry, and just the fact that it was missing that one letter, I was like, oh, this is so magical and foreign.
Oh, that's so and I was the same. I was in Bahrain reading the Harry Potter books. I think I was like the only Bahraini kid reading them. And the funny thing is, I never watched the movies. I only read the books. I never really got into the movies. There's something more magical for me about the books. But I think it was like that transformative thing of my childhood.
Yeah. Were you disappointed when you didn't receive a letter when you were old enough?
Yeah, definitely. I was like, I'm a muggle? What?
I was like, I know this isn't real, but some part of me is disappointed because what if it was?
It would make so much more sense if someone told me I belonged in the magic world.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to be a muggle, I'm glad that we got to eat all of your recipes and have all this delicious food because of it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Noor. This has been so much fun.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a great chat.
Brian Vole, welcome to This Is Taste. It's so great to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I've spoken about your books on Three Things earlier. I discovered menus by Brian at Kitchen Arts and Letters. The great owner, Matt Sartwell.
Love that guy.
Love that guy. Such a supporter of cookbooks. Hand sold me your book.
Oh, did he?
Absolutely. It's right at the checkout, and any good book seller will offer customers a great, you know what, you might like this one too. That kind of voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was so right. I also bought your book at the Great Vivian Booksellers in Portland, Oregon, which we're at. So that's my setup. I really love what you're doing. We're going to talk all about your process and what you've really established. You're on issue 12 now. So, but Brian, tell us how you got into writing cookbooks.
So I love cooking. That should come as no surprise to anybody listening to this podcast. But I love cooking and I love writing, and so those two together, I kind of thought for a long time that I would like to write a cookbook at some point. I never really had the time, so I thought it would be something that I maybe did when I retired, sort of a Brian's favorite recipes kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then a few years ago, I came up with what I thought was a really interesting concept. But even then, I wasn't going to sit down and write a 400-page cookbook all by myself. And then I remembered a fun fact from grade school that a lot of early novels were serialized. So rather than publish, a book like you might pick up at a Barnes & Noble now, they published one chapter at a time in Atlantic Magazine or a popular magazine at the time. And then I thought to myself, wait a second, what if I serialized a cookbook? Has that ever been done before? And so that's when I started, taking that idea I had and figuring out how to break it into smaller pieces, because of course a small 36-page 5x7 cookbook is a lot easier to achieve than, that 400-page tome of a cookbook.
Oh, we know that. We make them here. They're complicated projects. And really, these are cookbooklets, and the joy.
That's a term I need to trademark.
They're definitely you started that as a thing. I mean, they're so great to read because you have a process of writing these that is slightly uniform, and though each one has a really wonderful introduction, and really you're doing a great service. You're creating a menu. What was that important? The formatting of these booklets.
The format is important because it's the way I cook in a lot of ways. Now, I'm not sitting down and cooking 12 dishes every single night. But when you think about cooking dinner for yourself, you're not necessarily thinking about an individual recipe. You're not sitting down and making that one thing. You kind of have to think about a balanced meal, right? You've got to have a protein and you've got to have a salad. You've got to have vegetables. And so sort of pairing these all together in important ways is important to me because, again, you're not really, you're not cooking in a vacuum. You're not cooking a recipe in a vacuum. You're really thinking about the full menu, the full meal, all the way from, depending on how elaborate you want to get, from your starters all the way through your dessert.
Yeah, it's and you get the shopping list too.
And the shopping list.
Which is really, really important. So basically you have 6 or 7 courses
or 8 or 9.
Or 8 or 9, depending on the book. And you have a list to start. I mean, really, this is what you have to buy to make this meal happen. And it's not that daunting. You have a real skill for paring down and kind of swapping in or using ingredients in multiple spaces. And I think that's needed.
I'll be honest, I'm lazy. One of the first things I do when I do encounter a new recipe, is I kind of dumb it down, right? Because again, we're talking about a complete meal. Even if it's just a Tuesday night, it's maybe 2, maybe 3 dishes. But I don't want to overcomplicate things and use every single pot that I've got, because I've also got to make a salad. I've also got to, make a dessert or whatever it is that I'm making that night. So the first thing I do is simplify a recipe, because that just kind of makes it easier for myself. I do think a lot of recipe writers out there kind of approach a single recipe as a singularity, right? You're going to make this recipe and you're not going to make anything else. So I try to broaden the context and say, all right, well, you're going to make this recipe, but you're also making a handful of other things. And so let's be conscientious of the dishes that we're using. Let's be conscientious of the ingredients that we're using. Let's not go overboard. Let's not go crazy. I don't need 3 kinds of onion in one recipe. Let's just use one.
Let's pare it down. This is like straight talk from a passionate home cook, and that's needed in publishing. And I think that's why this has been a successful series. I want to just go over one of the menus that spoke to me, number 7. And to me, this feels slightly summary, but I think a lot of these menus can be used year round. You start with a mezcal and passion fruit cocktail, grilled sweet potatoes with cilantro, scallion, and lime. You've got a Portuguese and potato octopus dish. There's cherry tomatoes with cardamom lime yogurt. As the main, grilled chicken with green sauce. And then for dessert, preserved lemon bars. What a complete meal. But again, that shopping list is not that daunting. This is a really, really great dinner party you've set up.
Yeah, that was a fun one. Each of the menus is ostensibly seasonal. So you're right, that is one of the summer menus. You might notice if you look at the cover design, they change every 4 issues. So there's a summer, there's a winter, there's a fall and the spring. And then I change the cover design. Each of the dishes in the menus is, paired to sort of work together both in flavor and texture. You want to mix there when you're compiling a dinner party menu. But then I'm also trying to reduce waste. I think that is one of the key components of this. And so if I'm going to say, hey, use egg yolk in one of the recipes, let's say a Caesar salad, then we're definitely going to use that egg white in something. Maybe it's a savory granola. If I'm going to ask you to buy a bunch of parsley, everybody knows that a bunch of parsley goes farther than just one recipe. So let's use it in 2 recipes. And also let's maybe use the parsley stems in an interesting way, because a lot of people just throw that into the compost bin. Like let's use all the parts of the ingredient that we can, just so we don't throw things away.
So Brian, are you throwing dinner parties? Are you recreating your own menus for a crowd?
For a small crowd.
Yeah.
I will say, I think the menus I say feed 6 to 8. But yeah, I'll be perfectly honest. I don't throw as many dinner parties now as I did when I was younger. I don't quite have the energy that I did. But each of the menus does end in a party, right? I sort of come up with the idea and I tinker with it and I try different recipes and I try to get them all to work. And then once everything clicks, that's when I'm like, okay, friends, let's have a party. Let's hang out. Let's sort of see if these actually work in real life. And also, let's just put on some music and drink some wine and hang out and have a good time.
So when you're developing the recipes, you're doing it solo. Are you in your home kitchen? Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then sometimes you're bringing people into the mix.
Yeah. So I'm recipe testing almost every day. I'm trying different things, different ingredients, different methods almost every day. And so I guess a lot of my entertaining anymore is sort of less the official dinner party and more, hey, friend, I just made this chicken recipe. Do you want to come over? Because I have leftovers or I don't want to have leftovers.
Yeah.
So just sort of, it's a lot more informal now than it is than an official dinner party. But of course, throwing a dinner party is fun, right? You want to sort of be fancy and maybe get a little bit dressed up and have people over and like the formal entertainment aspect of it is nice.
It's like real talk about anybody who develops recipes. You're typically not. It's usually just like part of the process. And I've got a couple things I'm working on. Come over. And that's how it really goes. I mean,
that's actually where a lot of the interesting pairings come up. Is because I do have so many leftovers in my refrigerator at any given time. So on a Monday, I might make one dish, and on a Tuesday, I might make something completely different. By Wednesday, I've got all these leftovers, and I'm like, let me put these together. How does that taste? Oh, that's actually quite good, or that's disgusting. I'm never doing that again. But yeah, there's a lot of trial and error that way.
Tell me about your own education in food. I mean, are you looking at cookbooks? Do you have cookbooks around? Did you ever have a formal lesson in cooking?
I never had a formal lesson in cooking. I'm all self-taught. I should bring up my mother at this point just because she also loves to cook. And so we grew up with some amazing meals. She worked. I have 4 brothers, so there's 5 of us. But she also was really kind of curious in the kitchen and would make interesting dishes that she would just sort of use the kids as a guinea pig.
Yeah.
And so she might make something and it was delicious and we all wolfed it down. She might make something and it wasn't very good and we just order a pizza. But I think that was definitely an inspiration growing up and having that background. And I never really helped in the kitchen except for cleaning dishes on occasion. But just that background of, somebody who really introduced me to home cooking, and not just home cooking, but sort of expanding my horizons and seeking out interesting recipes and interesting ingredients. Yeah. So I sort of went into adulthood with that experience. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I kind of expanded on my own. And like I said, I'm self-taught and I just sort of...
Was it from cookbooks or was it online? Like, how were you teaching yourself?
A mix, I am a millennial. And so I did grow up with the internet. But of course, I love cookbooks. I do love to travel. And one of the things I do in preparation for a trip is I buy a cookbook from wherever it is that I'm going for a handful of reasons, one of which is I might come across a specific dish that I want to seek out. I might have a book on Mexican food and now I come across a dish that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And so I actively seek out that specific dish. Sometimes I find it, sometimes I don't. Some cookbooks, especially international ones, actually give specific places. And so if I get that cookbook in time or while I'm planning the trip, then I might actually go to a place. So I was for example, I was in Italy a few years ago and I definitely wanted to go to Rome. But I was also reading this cookbook about Pulian cuisine. Mm-hmm. And I read about this town called Bari and an octopus sandwich. And I was thinking to myself, yes, I'm definitely the type of person who's going to sit on a train for 5 hours from Rome to Bari so that I can have an octopus sandwich. And it was worth it.
I love that you went to Bari. I've been there. It's great town, great food city. And your interest in doing the work is wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
What's production like for these books? I mean, how many are you doing a year? And I know, are you designing it yourself as well and doing the whole thing?
I am a one-man show.
I love that.
So starts with research. Like I said, I travel a lot and I read cookbooks and I try to develop these recipes based on, those travels.
Yeah.
And then I usually start a menu with like one or two ideas that I'm particularly excited about. Sometimes it's a specific recipe, sometimes it's an ingredient, sometimes it's an interesting way to use kitchen scraps. An example of that is menu 5 or 6. I can't remember what the one with tapache in it.
Oh, yeah.
Tapache is a fermented drink from Latin America, mostly from Mexico. There it's seasoned with like cinnamon and star anise, but I came across it when I was in Puerto Rico, and it's on seasoned there. But I was really excited about just, oh my gosh, I can use the pineapple rind for something.
Yeah.
And so you just sort of start with an idea and then it builds from there. Because of course, if I'm using the pineapple rind in tepache, then I have to use the pineapple in something else.
Yeah.
So now I'm thinking through recipes that use pineapple, and I'm working through recipes for pineapple. And then of course that is going to have some kind of scrap, and I put that in air quotes, that needs to be used. And so it's sort of this cascading effect, developing these recipes or developing these menus. And then of course you get to a point where like, wait a second, this doesn't quite fit. And so now you kind of go back to the drawing board and rework that puzzle, because it is kind of
a puzzle, and you thread it really well. And how many are you doing a year?
I started with 4, then 3, then 2. But yeah, it really just kind of depends on my schedule.
Yeah, sure.
And how much time I have. I tend to set these like arbitrary deadlines for myself. I'm going to have menu number 12 done. It's a summer menu by June. Of course, it's June and menu 12 is not done.
Okay, fine.
But I also acknowledge the fact that these deadlines are arbitrary, right? They're self-published. I don't have a publisher breathing down my neck. And so I do get to kind of take that break, and I do have the privilege, I guess, of keep working on it, right? Is if it's not perfect, I don't want to put it out there.
No, definitely. Do you hear from your fans on social media and email who are cooking through it? What's that like?
So fulfilling. Literally last week, someone messaged me on Instagram and they're like, we did menu number 9. And they sent me pictures, and they had this lovely dinner party. And they just showed me all the dishes that they had made. And it really is quite fulfilling to get that feedback from people.
I love that you really set people up for success. You're giving them a very clear roadmap. And I think for many book buyers, that's the goal. I mean, some books are written as historical texts and to learn about the culture, why you buy books before you travel. But a lot of book buyers just want to make dinner or have a dinner party. And yours is as simple as it comes. So I love that. So how can you buy the books? I mean, talk about some of your partners on the indie bookstore front, and like, I imagine you can buy them online as well.
Yep. So you can buy them at my website, menusbybrian.com. Yep. And then, well, really I started with menu number 1, of course. And then once I had number 1, then I started shopping it around. The obvious retailer are cookbook stores. There are a handful of stores around the country that sell exclusively cookbooks. We've chatted about Kitchen Hearts and Letters here in the city. So they stock them there. Bold Fork Books down in the DC area. We mentioned Vivian out in Portland, now serving in LA. So there are, I think, maybe 9 or 10 cookbook stores around the country, and I think I'm in most of them.
Great.
And then also just a handful of like gourmet grocery stores. I thought that would be a good pairing. And so I've been reaching out to gourmet grocery stores around the country to see if they would stock them. There's a place in LA called Botanica
Yeah.
that stocks them as well. They were my first customer, actually.
Cool.
Yeah.
Props to them.
Yeah.
Botanica, great store.
Yeah, it's a great place. Kitchen Arts and Letters, Matt over there held out. He made me come out with 2 issues before he would stock it. But he was like, I like the concept here. Come to me when you've got another one.
That's how Matt rolls, you know. He understands the market, but you sell a lot out of Kitchen Arts, I'm sure. I love it. Have you thought about bringing it to the real world, doing your own pop-up that is inspired by your work?
There is a fine line between writing and slinging cookbooks and then becoming a caterer.
For sure.
So, like, on the one hand, you've got to cook some of the recipes so people know what they're getting into. On the other hand, I don't want people to hire me as a caterer. So I do a handful of little pop-up things to sell cookbooks and maybe some adjacent items. I did a little Christmas pop-up at a wine shop in my neighborhood last year. A friend of mine runs the wine shop, Radical Wines, in Clinton Hill. And he let me do a little pop-up, and we just drank some wine and sold some jams and sold some cookbooks, and it was just a lot of fun.
That's nice. It sounds like this is a business. You work very hard on it, but you also have a real perspective about what you can and can't do. It's a real lesson about indie publishing. I
am 30-something, and so I have sort of dabbled in, putting my toes in food and publishing. During my 20s, like I said, I'm a millennial. I had a blog when blogs were a thing. I had an Instagram account when Instagram accounts were a thing, and it was just sort of hard to really latch onto it. The internet culture is hard, right? The algorithms are just really hard to do well, especially if you have another full-time job. The Googles and the Facebooks and the Instagrams really reward you for posting regularly, and then they punish you for not posting regularly. And so there's sort of problems with that regardless, right? That's one of the reasons there's so much garbage on the internet. But having an unsuccessful blog and an unsuccessful Instagram account means I knew what I didn't want to do, or I knew what wasn't going to work. So finally, when it came to, writing menus, I was like, you know what, let's just take this into the real world.
Yeah.
Because people need that. People want that. People want an object to hold in their hands. And I also have the benefit of, it being under the radar and kind of niche where people think it's cool, right?
Yeah, it's beyond cool. I mean, it's special.
It's beyond cool. I love that.
Beyond cool, Brian. I mean, it's a great gift as well if you're looking for a stocking stuffer in the holiday season or just in general, a great price point and gives you a full menu. Love it.
Yeah.
So Brian, where do you want to be in 5 years with Menus by Brian? I mean, and you have some directions you can go in. I mean, do you want to double down and do more, or do you like this pace?
I like this pace. Again, it's just sort of on my own terms. I do have a worry that I'll run out of recipes, which is an absurd thing to say. But if you think about it, like most recipes are sort of derivatives of other recipes. And so I've already done a roast chicken, and so I don't want to do another roast chicken. So I do think there is maybe an end of life to menus. I don't know when that is, but I do want to kind of keep doing that for as long as it really makes sense. But I'm also not going to push it, right? There will be a natural ending, and I don't want to push it beyond that. But yeah, I think I'll just keep cooking, and I'll just keep writing, and I've got some other ideas percolating in my mind on, other concepts and projects which aren't ready, but it would be fun to
We'll report on it here. We're fans of yours. Brian Vole, thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a great time.
This Is Taste is hosted and produced by Matt Rodbard and me, Eliza Abarbanel. The show is edited by lead producer Clayton Gumber and supervised by Pat Stango, Director of Media Production and Development at Penguin Random House. Thanks to Shalia Harris and the production team at Penguin Random House. Theme music by Steve Rydell, logo and guest illustrations by Ellie Skurzat. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated on all cool things in the world of taste.